I've been working on prototypes for the Words Matter ink spill letters, and a huge part of the writing process is revising, and that's no different in a non-text-based form. And so here you can see several revisions that I've gone through as far as my prototypes in what I'm trying to achieve. Originally, I had in mind that the ink spill would span about 10 feet by 13 feet, which I quickly realized was a huge feat to accomplish, especially when working with liquid plastic, which I, after a lot of research, determined this was probably the best material to capture the gloss and the ink look to it. As you can see, kind of reflecting off this R here. But an ink pour that large was just not feasible. I don't have, first of all, the space to accommodate such a large pour, and as I was experimenting with the material, I realized that it very quickly cures, which makes it difficult to try and pour such a large area space. So after finding that out, I went with another idea of creating smaller ink spills that look like ink spots splattered on a sheet of paper, or the letters that have fallen off the page, still wet with ink, what they would look like when they touch the surface. And so this was my first prototype, and I used cardboard, and I just put masking tape or painter's tape around the cardboard, and then I poured the liquid plastic on top of that surface, so you can kind of see it peeking through there. And then I placed the 3D letter right on top. This worked out pretty well. I noticed that the edges were pretty rough. You can kind of see where there's like a lip on the plastic, which I wasn't really looking for as far as like the concept of an ink spill would be more spread out rather than with a lip on it. And you could also see on the sides the cardboard. So instead of trying to paint the cardboard and then doing the ink spill, I had found online these Elmer presentation boards. And they're basically just foam presentation boards that students often use to do poster presentations on. And so I tried cutting out ink spills in the shape like I had on the cardboard, and then pouring the plastic on top of it. But what I discovered was that when I did that, the foam material in between, I don't know if you can see it here, that foam material actually causes the liquid plastic to bubble as it starts curing. And so you can see on this one how rough and kind of coarse the top of that surface is. And for ink, it needs to be really smooth. So this wasn't ideal for what I was looking for. So then I tried to just pour the liquid plastic directly onto the letter, but on a surface that I could peel it off so that it wasn't actually part of the letter. It was just after it had cured, it became its own shape. And you can see that with this T here. So I actually poured it over a plastic shower curtain, which allowed me to eventually peel it off once it had cured. But you can still see on the sides where the cardboard air bubbles were, that it's kind of bubbly as well. And so I wasn't really completely satisfied with this, and so I went back to the drawing board and thought about some other ways that I could maybe accomplish the same idea. So one thing that I thought of was, instead of actually pouring the liquid plastic on the letter, that maybe I could just make the shape of the liquid ink spill without the letter, and then do the letter separately. So just pour liquid plastic on top of the letter shape, the surface, and then place the two on top of one another to kind of look like that. Which was okay. I realized that if the liquid plastic was not a certain depth that it would not cure. So really being careful of how much liquid plastic was in a particular spot, which can be kind of hard because I was just pouring it onto that shower curtain, so it's hard to like move or level out. And so I found that out with this one here, which is on a paper towel because it's still sticky, versus this one that actually cured the whole way. So went back to the drawing board and reconsidered my first idea about using silly putty or oobleck or gack as a way to create that texture. And so after visiting the venue space, I realized that the floor was not as contrast with the black ink color. It's more of a dark gray, and I really wanted the ink spill to pop. And so I thought more about that and how I could achieve it. And so now I'm intending to place these letters on a large canvas sheet. And so I was, this isn't the exact fabric, but I was messing around with placing the silly putty on that and then placing the letter on top of it. So this has actually sat for several days, and it's actually hardened over time. So it's been a couple weeks, and what was once silly putty is now kind of embedded in this fabric, but it still has a really nice shine and gloss to it, which I like. So I'm definitely thinking about moving forward with this and making the bottom surface of the ink spill out of silly putty, and as it sinks into the fabric, it kind of takes on more of those characters that I was looking for. So that brought me kind of back to, and you can see over here where I was testing out the silly putty on a surface that was similar to the surface in the venue space, because I was worried initially about the dye dyeing the floor, and that would obviously be very worrisome. Since they're letting me use the space, I want to leave it the way I found it and not damage anything while I'm in there. So this is actually hardened over several weeks as well, and you can kind of tell that it's hard to get up. But it also has a very different texture than what happened with the fabric over here. And I definitely like this version a bit better. But that again was just another prototype that I was practicing with. And on top of the R, you can see how instead of covering the entire letter, I was experimenting with just pouring the liquid plastic on certain portions. And so when it's laid on top of the underneath surface, it gives it that more dimensional look than I thought placing the two things on top of each other achieved. So this was a little bit better than this one, I think. But then I'm still kind of tinkering around with how I'm going to cover the letters. And so over here, I was trying to do, based on what I found out with this one, not covering the sides of the cardboard because they have the potential of bubbling, but just coating the top portion so that it gives it that shine and shimmer, so it looks like wet ink letters, but it doesn't get as bubbly or jagged on the side because it's just on the top. And I tried that with a couple of them, and this material, the liquid plastic, is really a hard medium to work with because it seems to have a lot of variability. So one thing I discovered was originally I was pouring all of this in a garage outside because of the fumes from mixing the chemicals. Didn't want to bring it in the house. But I quickly discovered that depending on the temperature and the humidity, it can really impact how the plastic cures and what it looks like. So, for example, I think that's part of why this one is still sticky. I also think the depth of it is a factor as well. But I will say that on the ones that I did pour outside, it was on like more of a rainy day, they tend to have more of a purple shine to it rather than the black I don't know if you can really see it on this one, but it's a little bit more purple. And I think it has a lot to do with the environment in which I was using it in. So I've moved everything inside, and I thought that would help a lot. And I did a couple, and it seemed to really improve how the medium cured. But the other day when I was moving forward with pouring on the top coat of the letters, you can see this was one of the first ones, and it did all right, but you can see where there's potentially areas where it looks very like rugged, like not settled well. And from there, it just kind of got worse. So it kind of shows you how quickly this liquid plastic cures, because it was from the same mix. I'd poured it on this one, and then I tried to pour a little bit on this one. And so really getting that timing down so that something like this doesn't happen is going to be really important. And so that's where I'm kind of at now. And you can see how when I had an unsuccessful pour, I tried pulling off the top layer. Since there's about 6 layers of cardboard, I thought, oh, well, I don't need to waste the other 5 layers. I can just replace the top layer and move forward from there. But you can see how difficult it is to remove plastic. Makes sense. After you've poured it. And this was another version of attempting to use the foam, but I added a layer of cardboard on top of the foam, thinking that maybe that would help, but it didn't. So that's kind of where I'm at with this and figuring out where to go from here.